Good evening and welcome to the new season of Translation Capsules, free online talks between translation and interpreting specialists and members of the Department of Translation, Interpreting and Applied Languages of the University of Vic, Central University of Catalonia. Today, it is a pleasure to count on the presence of Anthony Pym, a leading scholar on translation studies, and Richard Samson, lecturer at the University of Vic, Central University of Catalonia. Before we start, I'd like to mention the organizations that have promoted this activity: IDISC, Tech for Word, PEN Català, Elmo Editorial, Institut Ramon Llull, the Spanish Association of Conference Interpreters, and the APAC, the Association of English Teachers of Catalonia. And of course, thank you all for joining us. If you want to follow us in Twitter or other social networks, remember that our hashtag is ConversaTrat. If you have questions, you can write them in the chat and we'll ask them to Anthony Pym after the conversation. Well, Richard, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Katerina. So, as you probably know, these capsulas have been going on. I think this is our 10th season, or maybe it's the 11th. I'm not sure. You can check on the Tradiling webpage. You can see the whole catalogue of talks, and we've had some very interesting people talk to us, and it's a special pleasure for me to introduce to you Anthony Pym, because he is one of the most prestigious, eminent, important figures in our field over the past few years. And for him not to be in our series would be an omission, and for him to be in our series is certainly a luxury. And I think that I'd just like to add, we just mentioned it before when we were warming up, that this is Anthony's retirement year. So this, in a way, could be the first homage to Anthony in his retirement year. I hope that that's not too pretentious to say that. So Anthony Pym, for those who don't know, is a very eminent scholar in translation studies and intercultural studies. He's a professor at the Universidad Rovira i Virgili in Tarragona. He was presided over the European Society for Translation Studies in 2010 and 2016. He's published over 30 books and 270 articles, and he's known for situating translation and translators as cultural agents who are motivated, let's say, by ethics of intercultural cooperation within the discipline. Well, we're going to put some of those grand expressions to the test in the following conversation. So anything you'd like to add, Anthony, to what I've just said?
No, that's far too much, Richard. But introduce yourself, perhaps.
No. I'm just a journeyman here. I've been working in translation as a professional translator and as a teacher over 30 years, and I've specialized in translation with the support of technology and teaching online with technology tools, and I've been very active in Moodle worldwide. So that's enough about me.
But Richard, we're both retiring, so
we are both retiring.
It's an occasion for reflection. Yes, okay.
But we're also very good adverts for retirement, because we're both looking remarkably well, and long may that last.
I was going to say, people will think translation studies is for old balding men, but well, what can we do? What can we do about it?
I've been bald for many years, and so have you.
So yes, I'm quite used to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's start the conversation. So when you look at translation studies today, Anthony, what strikes you about the field? I mean, let me be a bit more provocative. Let's say translation studies really struggled when I started in the field to establish itself as an independent field, as something that was like really exist, and that you could be a specialist in this field, and it wasn't just a kind of branch of linguistics or a branch of cultural studies, that it was something maybe separate. And now we in this very, very turbulent times, we're seeing what some people might see as the end of translation studies. No, I've been provocative enough. How do you see it?
How do I see it? Well, I went through that heroic stage of struggling to establish the new young discipline. In my case, in the 1980s, in Spain, there was a big battle around 1992 to have a more than a 3-year program in translation studies, and um, yeah, and that pertains to the generation that came before us, the generation of Gideon Toury, José Lambert, etc. Um, and I think we were too successful. I mean, the struggle and the fight and the argument very suddenly through the 90s, um, people around us saw that students were coming into translation studies, that is, courses to train translators and interpreters, and they had good career prospects and they could get jobs, and it was better than in the languages and literature programs around us. And that accounted for a lot of the success of the discipline, I think. These days, God knows, I can't presume to know the extremes and ends and limits of translation studies. There are many, many things happening with that name, uh, some of which just don't interest me. I don't look at it or I don't read it, for example. There are people for whom translation is all mediation in all societies, and we can do translation studies looking at mediation across the board. That's fine. That's an interesting kind of sociology, but it's not the translation studies I've been doing. Others see translation in all meaning production, for example. The people working in complexity theory will do that. That's fine too. If they can come up with something interesting and tell me something new and interesting that helps solve my particular problems, great. But beyond that, to tell you the truth, I don't care that much. I don't care that much about fighting for a discipline or against it or trying to define it. Um, you didn't mention there, but I went to Melbourne in 2017 and I went through the COVID thing all through Melbourne. And I became far more interested in questions like how do you get a multilingual, multicultural city to work with tolerance and cooperation between all these many different groups? How do we get COVID information to all those people? Uh, those kind of problems interest me far more than any narrow concept of translation. And there I was working alongside people in medical communication and social linguists, cultural anthropologists as well. And I found that far more exciting than trying to set up any narrow discipline.
I think
Um,
that's
yeah,
interesting.
you see what I mean? Yeah,
Yeah, I'm going to interrupt you because otherwise I won't even get two questions into
yeah,
this.
that's right. Yeah. Wind me up and yeah, set me off.
I just wanted to say that, well, you've obviously, set the ball rolling very well there. I think that the situation of translation studies is also a situation of many other disciplines, and what we're seeing is my friend Ricardo Munoz, who I think is on the call, he talks to me often about this. We're seeing the collapse of the structure of isolated disciplines in academia. In the future, everything will be multidisciplinary or will be nothing. You can't make these kind of compartments of specialized knowledge that people have tried to set up so far.
Well, we bring in certain skills, we could say don't forget about language. And different languages are different after all, and there are things we can do to adjust and communicate across them. It's not like we're all in this gray mass. So there's a skill set and there's a set of problems to work on that pertain to language translation, and those are the ones that I tend to work on more than anything else. But does that mean I have to defend a closed discipline? I don't think so.
Let me ask you about something. I'll put it to you because we've talked about translation studies in general, but I think also as an immigrant to Spain, I think the situation in Spain is rather different to most countries. I mean, there's so many undergraduate translation programs in Spain, and most people who are studying translation are actually doing a lot of language study. I mean, they start doing translation studies when from languages in which they have a very limited competence in some cases, in the so-called lingua franca, for example. And that's a quite marked contrast to other countries where language translation studies tends to be a kind of master's degree level occupation, and seems to be for people with a much more life experience and baggage that they bring to the, and maybe some professional experience that they bring to the table when they study. And my feeling is that the mixture of studying language and studying translation is not always helpful. I think it creates a kind of what's the word? Dilutes the translation element and promotes the language study element. So we call it translation studies, but there's a lot of language learning basically going on. What do you think about that?
Yeah, a couple of things there. I've long argued that the professional training should be at postgraduate level when people have the languages. That's not the case in Spain. It's not the case in Germany. Mind you, Germany and countries north of there, the language training in secondary schools is much, much better than it is in Spain. So they can do some serious things. Look, the striking thing is that in all the surveys I've come across, only about a third of our graduates at master's level or in the long 4 or 5 year undergrad, 5 year for the licenciatura, only about a third become professional translators or interpreters for any length of time. So we've long been training people in skills that are used in a lot more jobs and a lot more mediation activities than just strict translation and interpreting. So looked at that way, it's not such a bad thing to have the language learning going on. The other thing that's bothered me is, back in that heroic struggle days, we wanted separate discipline. Mary Stell Hornby said, cut the umbilical cord with the modern languages department. And looking back, I think that was a huge mistake. I think that language education needs translation activities, needs awareness of translation, especially these days with the automation tools that we have around us. People are using automatic translation. They don't know what it's doing. They can't appreciate where it can go wrong. And what we've done is take away translation from language learning. The people in language learning say, oh, great, we'll just do immersion, as they do in Catalonia, as an language ideology, immersion. And we've gone along in two separate fields since really the 1970s, 80s. I think that's wrong. I think a lot of what we're doing now has to address language education and translation, because the language teachers are dealing with exactly the same problems that we translator trainees are dealing with. So sorry to upset the preconceptions, but
No,
I'm not
fine.
too worried that they're all together at undergrad level. Let people learn languages, explore things, have fun, and get serious at postgrad level.
Well, then let me tell you another thing that I'm concerned about, or not concerned. No, I don't have sleepless nights about, obviously, but I think that is curious, let's say. The organization of the curriculum in translation studies that tends to go towards specialization in the third and fourth year. And I think that most of the I mean, for example, I would like to see interpreting done in the first year.
Yeah.
I think it's much more motivating and much more hands-on and much more situated than handing out texts and discussing small differences or small mistakes, let's say, or something like that. So I remember talking to Basil Hatim about this and a few years ago, and he is obviously much more focused on the pragmatics of translation, and yeah, he loved the idea of mixing it up and not because if we say we're going to do medical translation, we're going to do you know divulgative text translation or whatever, then we end up also studying a lot of terminology, which I don't know how useful that is these days, let's say.
No, I think motivation, well, all education people know that motivation's the key, and you should do things at the beginning that motivate people. And those things often are interpreting, which I work in an English department, right?
Mm.
We have an introductory course. I do interpreting in the course, and people love it. They have fun. They discover some can do it, some can't do it. That's okay. Subtitling as well, a great activity. They have fun, they enjoy it, they can see their product and share it, do their favorite shows, do subtitles for them. Uh, Basil upset. He did a textbook for Arabic English, and the first text in the book was a legal text. Say, Basil, why are you starting with legal? And he would say, oh, because it's the easiest, because it's the most regulated, because
Yeah.
you can get the term. And from there, it went into mixed genres, which of course got much harder. So, yeah, we could do a lot to rethink the curriculum, but I think getting motivation, particularly at these times when people are scared of their future employment with AI, it's great to start with things that people enjoy.
Yeah.
Don't know if people actually enjoy the legal translation, but they do find it's much easier than they think at first sight. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of concern about AI. Obviously, as you've mentioned it, I shouldn't shy away from it. Um, I think that you mentioned it already that a lot of people are going into like jobs where their language training and translation training is one quiver to their bow. They're not, 100% translating. They're the language specialist in a department, for example, and they can take on a number of tasks. So I think that's already been part of the situation for a while. The only people who seem to be like really dedicated to translation are the literary translators who seem to do it as a passion. But the other people more and more are doing it as part of let's say a multifaceted professional experience. I think that that's quite generally true. I suppose so. There are interpreters, professional interpreters specializing still. Long may it last. But how do you see the AI turn, let's say? Do you think that can you be a bit upbeat about this for our listeners?
And I'd be a bit upbeat about it. Look, for researchers, there's never been a more exciting time because there's so much that's happening there that we don't understand, that we don't know. These cultural theorists who go shock horror, AI produces results and we don't know how it got there, and therefore they'll take over humanity. What a load of rubbish. For me, that's exciting. The entropy in the system that is create. People who say, "Oh, AI, it can't be creative. It doesn't understand context. It doesn't understand emotions." Of course, it understands context and emotions, etc. It learns the way little kids learnt through interacting with data over and over and over. So I'm upbeat with the technology. I'm upbeat about research on it because I find it exciting and very creative. And I am not so upbeat about the future of employment for the people we train unless they can work with this technology and control it and make sure that it's being used to augment their skills rather than replace those skills. What does that mean? It means knowing the technology very well, knowing how to use it, knowing how to sell work with it to people, to talk about it, to market themselves. So, what a lot of our language companies need these days, what they're looking for, are people who can explain this to clients very well and be that interface with clients using verbal communication skills in addition to everything else. Uh, there are there's employment in cleaning databases, and that's basically donkey work, and I don't recommend that. Some people enjoy that kind of thing. They're welcome to go down that route if they want. But I think that's why I mentioned that one third, it was one third back in the 1980s and the 1990s. Okay, so it shouldn't be such a shock to us that there's not a direct link with employment. People are going to have to find employment elsewhere in other kinds of mediation in society.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so I'm not. The other thing is, yeah, people, oh, they say Gen AI can translate really well. It must be the end of the road for translators. Well, yes and no, but we came through the switch to neural machine translation after 2016. So, we sort of had that first shock. We got used to that. We absorbed that. I think now we're discovering that we can absorb a lot of the shock of Gen AI work. Happily, it still makes mistakes and it still fools people and gives all the false references and cannot be used for high stakes or high risk texts. Happily, people are coming to realize that a human in the loop is still needed. And to that extent, there will be employment around. But it'll be much less than in the previous decade. We might go back to where we were in the 1990s, I think.
It's uh, a very turbulent times. Obviously, that's I think it's so difficult to tell the future. I remember I never saw this coming. I thought that I thought the translation would resist the automatic or machine or robot incursions for much longer. So I mean, I'm lousy at telling the future, and this is not the first time this has happened to me in my life. I remember when everything was going digital at the beginning of the 1990s, and I was still photocopying things like mad, as if as if paper was going to be useful. I was even buying dictionaries, and I never used them, of course, ever again. So
Uh,
um,
Dictionaries are around us, yes. Okay. So it looks good on shelves. I think
yeah.
it's what it's useful for.
Well, I want to.
Visual knowledge.
It's fascinating talking to you, Anthony. I think I'm going to ask you. If you don't want to talk about this, tell me, and I won't. But I have the memory of a fish, so I don't remember this very well. But you've been involved in some pretty some quite upfront arguments, notably the with Mona Baker, right? With the in 2002, wasn't it, when she expelled Miriam Schlesinger and Gideon Toury from her editorial boards because
Yeah.
she took the road of political activism and said that she was taking part in the boycott against Israel, and it wasn't anything personal. And I think you took the position that that was not a suitable role for translators, and that developed into some further episodes, let's say, and actually involved a lot of other people, and it gave rise to other new divides, let's say empiricist or narrative schools or evidential schools of translation theory. Do you want to comment on all that, or do you want to just let it go?
Look, it's hard to comment on the interpersonal level, and I don't do that in my teaching. I've got a few of my doctoral students online here, so they know that when I do the teaching or the research training, I don't go into that. I mean, that's the past. You don't want to pass on bad blood to the next generation. There's no point in that, I think, except when it does concern the activity that we're doing. In this case, translation studies in the sense of research on translation. And the arguments from some people in our community are against empiricism. And that's when I raise my hand and say, I'm sorry, no, but you have to have ideas and check them on the basis of data of some kind, qualitative, quantitative, etc. And that's something I do believe in, especially these days when there's so much bullshit around us about AI, for example. My one reply is, well, get down and find out for yourself. Get some data, check it, do some experiments, find out. And where people say, no, that's an imperialist imposition, that's what a lot of crap. Come on. Uh, what I'm saying is not that radical. Um, the other thing concerns, now that we retire, it's a good place to reflect on what we've been doing. I think it's been a great privilege to belong to the university system. Not only have I kept in constant contact with young people for too many years, but I've worked with people who, in many, many disciplines, I've been a translator for much of my time and working with people in many disciplines around us who know a lot of things, who are prepared to share knowledge and discuss it. And I believe that the university system all over the world allows us to speak with everybody who's interested in the knowledge and skills that we work on. Everybody. That doesn't matter what country you come from, your age, your race, your anything, everybody. I also believe that the knowledge and skills we produce should be freely available to all. So what's happening in academic publishing is far more horrendous for me than anything that might have happened back in 2002 or 2003. So I do believe in the ethos of the university, and it's from that ethos that I would oppose boycotts. I didn't want to boycott Mona Baker because she was employed in a country that illegally attacked um, Iraq, for example. Yeah? That would be crazy for me to do that. So yeah, I defend the values of the university system. It's as simple as that, I think.
Sorry, I had my microphone off.
Mm.
Because I'm coughing a bit. I've got a bit of a cold. Yeah, so it's interesting to hear you defend the university, the values. You say you defend the values of the university, but I see the universities as one of the myself as one of the most vulnerable institutions, one of the most prestigious and also most vulnerable. Yeah, the highest, maybe those with the the farthest to fall. I mean, we have a millennial tradition, and we congratulate ourselves on being at the center of this great civilization. Yet we do seem to be out of touch. Many of the most important advances that are taking place in the world nowadays are not happening in universities; they're happening in the corporate sector, I think. And that's it's a concern. It's a concern also in, for example, in Spain, we have a very top-down approach to university studies, and everything has to be approved by the central government for the recognized courses, long courses, and of course the curriculum is massively out of date, really. I would say in most cases, and so it's creatively reinterpreted by many people with the depending on the degree of tolerance they're allowed. But there certainly seems to be a lot of tension within the system because the context is changing so fast. Would you quite care to comment on what I've said?
Yeah, look, I just wrote a piece actually on learning outcomes and how learning outcomes should be so open that they enable exploration of the unknown rather than assume stable knowledge. And if you write your learning outcomes like that, you can go ahead and do any experimentation you like in class. When I teach, I really don't even look at that, socialist 5-year planning, thing. I go and do whatever the students are interested in, and we do it together. And you can do that. There's no penalization has ever come to me for that. As for the university system, I mean, we're under fire these days, particularly in the United States, for being a left-wing bubble, and that's very true. Absolutely true. That's all the way through. I've been in the university in many different countries now. Sure, we're all the lefties, and when you have opinions that don't coincide, like for example, me not supporting a boycott, and then people come and say, "Oh, I thought you were one of us on our side, on the good guy side." No, wait a minute. There's room for more than one opinion here. We can have debates here. And I think that the system itself has been sheltered from what's happening outside politically. And then technologically, if you think about translation and the way we work, the field has been transformed by a series of technologies, and they have been developed outside of the university system. Statistical came from Ochin, who was working at Google at the time. The translation memory software is all proprietary and held by companies. For European research programs in translation, there have been many, but I struggle to name a real outcome that helps us in the profession. The one that comes to mind is called MateCat, but the rest, I'm happy to help people spend all that research money, but I can't name a concrete outcome that has helped the profession. So yeah, we could be doing better, yes, but that's not a reason for turning your back on the ethos of the system itself.
My microphone again. We're coming to the end of this chat now, Anthony. We could go on for hours, I think, but we must follow the rules. I want to ask you about. I've read quite a few of your texts, not a lot in relation to the total volume that you've published, which is immense. But one of the theories that most engaged me was your approach to translation as risk management, and I think that was very, very, very helpful approach to considering how translation is done, let's say, and how we can decide between options. Do you want to comment a little bit about your risk model?
Uh, Not much, except to say that I got to it. There was a period in translation studies when the previous generation was talking about equivalence as a thing to be obtained, and research was there to find the nature and types of equivalence. And then a whole generation came in and said, no, the text is transformation, it's a reinterpretation, there's a whole hermeneutic process. And from that debate, it was rather confusing. And I wanted to defend the profession, but I didn't want to go back to the terminology of the previous paradigm. And risk management for me was a way of saying, right, okay, look, we have to recognize things go wrong in communication. As Andrew Chesterman said, there's communicative suffering. How can we mitigate it? And the translator is there to remove communicative suffering, to enable people to have some measure of success in communication. And from there, you go through risk management, not as the goal of what the translator does, but as the way in which we can avoid suffering, avoid error, if you want to put it in those terms. So it was there to replace equivalence at the beginning. And from then, it's a very rich field in business, in management, in mathematics. It's a very rich field to explore and borrow from. And I've just done a very little bit of that.
Okay, and looking at your time at the Rovira in Vigili, I think that you've created although you say you work in a language department, you've created a postgraduate school of a tradition of translation studies with summer schools, many doctorates, and many doctoral students is still coming along under your aegis. So I think that speaks for itself. But is there anything you'd like to pick out particularly from your time leading translation studies and translation researcher training in Rovira Vigili?
Yeah, look, um, we had a model for doctoral training, okay, which was basically online, but we had two periods where we were face to face here in Tarragona. And the first one happened to be at the beginning of February, usually late January, February. They're quite intense training with international experts coming in. And then the weekend comes, and we have to go out to a farm here, my wife's family farm, and eat calçots. You know what calçots are? Burnt onions, and have a barbecue, drink lots of red wine. And then when you're full of the onions and the wheat and the wine, you have to go and play football, that is soccer. So and some of the people were there just, what the hell have I walked into here? I thought this was a serious program. It was serious, but those events, the calçotadas and the football match, were community building, and they were also great fun. So looking back on the years in which that started in 2003, looking back on that, I think we've done some great training. We got some great research done. Superb doctoral students all over the world. I'm so proud when I see them go out and have success these days. But I look back and say, we had some really good fun as well. And I don't think we should forget that having fun, enjoyment, motivation, community building is a part of the educational process as well.
Well, for my part, many congratulations on everything that you've achieved. I think that I've been lucky to coincide not with you so much, but with many people who have studied and worked with you, and your influence reaches far beyond what you know. And I think that just say thank you for that. So you're going to stick around, no? You're not going back to Australia. That's you
No, no, I live so much better in Spain. Don't tell
pulled
anybody in
pulled
Australia.
up anchor.
No, no, we live better in Spain. Quality
Yeah,
of life. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So we look forward to staying in touch and getting news. So I'm going to draw this bit of the interview to a close, the conversation to a close, Anthony. Thank you very much for your generosity. I think that I think there have been a lot of participations in the chat. Let's see what Catalina's got for us. This is like a TV program, no? It's like saying, what surprises are in store for us now? Catalina.
Okay, thank you both for such an interesting conversation. There are many comments and questions, some of them very long, so I'll start. So, do you recommend any program for creating subtitles with students?
Who, me or Richard?
You. Well, Richard,
I
if you have any idea,
Okay.
share them as
No, I
well.
tell the truth. I use AG sub because it's cheap and nasty and robust, and then we use Mate sub, but I wish they would give us free licenses. Yeah.
Okay.
Mate sub is like you call it mate. We call it mate cat, which you mentioned in the conversation. Is
Yeah,
that
I
part?
use the Australian version,
Yeah,
Mate sub.
mate cat. Yeah, mate cat. All right, mate.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Okay, so the next question is, what do you think about ideologies influencing in the field, in theory and in practice?
Is that for me?
Yes.
Oh, look, I don't believe in neutrality. I think we all have ideologies, especially unconscious ideologies, and they are part and parcel of what we do. So bring it on. Sure, why
I
not?
think you said, is this true? You said that neutrality was a necessary fiction, no, for questions of trust. That is that true? Did you say that?
Yeah, it can be. Yeah. Actually, going back to my first book, 1992, I have an analysis of the linguistic ways in which the illusion of neutrality is created. And some people read that as me defending neutrality as the translator's position, though far from the case. There's no neutrality in the translator's position. Uh, Especially, the translator defends themselves. You want to get paid correctly. You want to be recognized. You want to achieve a vital place in the communicative situation. So yeah, all ideologies. There's no neutrality.
Okay, excellent. Here's a long one. Um, This person says, I really like your comment about translation undergrad programs not necessarily needing to focus on specialized translation. In my experience, unless you continue working with, say, legal texts, whatever I learned about legal translation at school had to be relearned in the real world. What I recall about those courses, legal translation, medical translation, literary translation, is learning translation skills in general, accessing parallel text, analyzing the context of the document being translated, creating a terminology database, consulting existing databases, adapting or not, culturally obscure references, etc. If undergrad programs do without specialized translation courses, what would we teach students? What would the vehicle be for those essential skills translators need to learn, regardless of the field of specialization?
Skill number one, learn to learn. That's it. You can use they're all case studies of how you learn a particular field, how you get up to speed very quickly in a particular field. So it doesn't matter which specialization you use or for how long, what you're learning is how to learn, and that's a transferable skill.
Okay. Okay, so what can you tell us about the decline of languages and translation programs in universities, for example, in the UK?
Well, Thatcher wanted to bring in economic criteria, and economic criteria means you teach what people want, and languages are inevitably going to decline in importance as English affirms itself as the lingua franca, the international lingua franca. And that the translation programs in the UK were just kept alive by Chinese students. As soon as Xi Jinping turns off the tap, they're all dead. So yeah, look, it's an economic inevitability, I think. Accept it, live with it.
Okay. This person says, I'm from a country where translation and interpreting skills were taught at postgrad level, but they're always under linguistic programs. Therefore, the development of translation studies and research in my country is not as developed compared to other countries. I wonder if you have any suggestions on what steps could be taken to support the development of translation studies as more independent and practice-oriented discipline in this particular context.
I think, as I said before, I'm not that look, I don't think the solution is on the institutional level. It's on getting individual people and researchers to research what they really want, read whoever they want, and not care what kind of department they're in, and get students motivated for the things that are going to be most vital in their future employment. So I don't complain about the institutions. Go and change them from within in your daily practice. Look, it's never been easier to gain access to knowledge about translation. Everything we do is free online somewhere. Uh, yeah.
Okay. Next question is, at this point, is it even possible for the universities to actually innovate on the same level as companies like Google with immense budgets and manpower?
Sure. On the level of ideas, why not? Why not? We're paid to sit in offices like this and produce ideas. And the people who work in Google come from universities after all. It's not like we're cut off. The thing is, Google in particular does not want to work with any outside institution because of industrial secrets, privacy, confidentiality. But no, I was invited to give lectures at Google, and I went there and had great fun on campus, as they say. They imitate the university system. They call it a campus. Yeah. Uh, so yeah, why not? And Stanford next to Google, well, Mountain View next to Silicon Valley. Stanford is a powerhouse of new ideas in high tech.
Okay. So, in this discussion, the focus tends to remain on traditional linguistic translation or, at most, intercultural translation. However, these perspectives often overlook the increasingly multimodal nature of meaning making, particularly in contemporary digital communication environments. If we understand intersemiotic mediation as a legitimate form of translation, how might translation studies more fully incorporate intermedial and multimodal forms of translation, especially those emerging in digital media, into its theoretical frameworks and research methodologies? What implications might this expanded view have for the discipline moving forward?
Bravo, bravo, Katerina. We need to plug our questions into an automatic abbreviation system.
Yeah. To answer it, if I may, absolutely, absolutely. This is what we have to look at. That was one of the key things I got out of all the COVID communication research. That, we had a government that was producing pamphlets and websites when people got their information on their phones and through WeChat and WhatsApp and audio-visual formats. And so you just had to say to the government, rethink your entire communication. Don't think of translation, think of an entire multilingual communication program that has to reach people where they find their information and in the format they find it. Now, does that mean abandoning all prior translation studies? I don't know. I don't think so. I think if you look at a lot of our concepts, they can handle work in different media and work across media quite happily. I don't see any basic conceptual revolution happening there, but I'm open to whatever ideas might be coming along.
So, next question. Um,
We're not gonna put you through the ringer much longer, Anthony. Don't worry. But we've had quite a few people following us, and you've also given rise to a lot of questions.
In previous waves of technological disruption, did student numbers, general interest, or public confidence in translation and interpreting decline as well? It feels particularly tricky at the moment. While research in translation is becoming really exciting, the academic job market seems to be worsening with programs being cut and so on.
Yeah, 2024 saw a decline, I think, across the world. Some programs held their own, but in Spain, you have the score that students have to get into the program, and that score went down. So you made your numbers of intake, but with less prestige in the student body. So yeah, sure. We thought the same thing would happen in 2016 with neural machine translation. It did a bit, but not a lot, and bounced back. The problem here is public perception, stupid public discourse on the threats of AI. And I think the way to counter that is to give examples and explain to people why you need humans in the loop and why AI should not be used for any high risk communication and give examples of where it screws up. I've been publishing a few of those examples.
Someone wants to know the name of the book that you mentioned with
Yeah, oh,
the
geez.
illusion of neutrality.
Yeah, translation and text transfer.
Okay.
As a free version on my website.
And with AI changing translation competencies, how can we link our translation courses with job requirements?
Figure out where your students go first. Do a survey of where your previous students actually get jobs. So you've got an idea of what kind of requirements are out there in the market. And then you incorporate that into your learning outcomes. Also, speak with your students at the beginning, explain them something about translation, and ask them to write 3 questions that they would like to have answered in that course. And then you try to address them. But do not go and talk to some big translation companies, get a list of things that they think are important and copy that and apply it in your training. Why? Because only a third at best of your students are going anywhere near that company that you've spoken with. You have to be more creative.
Um, Ricardo Munoz says that he has to leave, but he thanks you and wishes you a great year and an even nicer from now on.
Okay.
And
Adios, adios, Ricardo.
okay, and uh, someone says that she loved your comment on the importance of fun in research and teaching. And her question is, will you both continue to have fun with languages in your retirement? And
Well,
it looks
Richard can answer that
like you
one.
will.
Well, yeah, I've got a number of projects that I'm interested in and that I will, let's see, because I'm a notoriously dispersed person, I get distracted by things very easily. And so watch this space is what I say. I'm not going to give any more details.
Yeah, I think I'm the same. I've got some ideas I want to play with just to find out. Oh no, I've got a competition with my son. We're going to become influencers. This is the big challenge, yeah? Get it multimedia communication, practical test. You get fans, you don't get fans, whatever. So yeah, I've got some challenges facing me. Yeah. I might write some books as well along the way.
Well, thank you, Anthony Pym and Richard Samson. It's been really inspiring and funny. And thank you all again for attending. Before we leave, I'd like to remind you that the next capsule will take place on April 28th with Ania Jankowska and Florian Bardini. And the next capsule will focus on translation and accessibility. Well, thank you and see you all very soon.
Thank you very much, Richard.